I paid my parents' mortgage for 5 years in secret. At my sister's wedding, I found out where the money really went. The cop was still writing in his notepad when my father looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You are a cold, heartless girl." He was standing on the gravel driveway of my lake house. Behind him, 2 patrol cruisers had their lights spinning, blue strobes cutting through the pine trees like something out of a nightmare. My mother was on the porch in white capris and a floral blouse, screaming at Officer Dennis Pulaski of the Lakeview County Sheriff's Department, 11 years on the force. Their SUV was parked half on the grass. The trunk was open. I could see the suitcases. I could see my mother's wine-red duffel bag, the one with the broken zipper she'd had since 1998, sitting on my lawn like it belonged there. They had actually done it. They had driven 2 hours north, ignored my certified letter, ignored my security system, ignored every single word I had said, and used an old brass key to open my front door. A key I gave them 4 years ago, for emergencies. My father thought this was an emergency. His retirement fund was the emergency. His comfort was the emergency. His refusal to book an apartment was the emergency. I was not allowed to have emergencies. I was Ruby. I fixed them, but that was before. Before I stood in a reception hall in a yellow bridesmaid dress, gripping a champagne flute so hard my knuckles went white, and watched my mother hold up a blue folder and give away the house I had secretly paid for 5 years as a wedding gift to my sister. Before that night, I had never once said no. It took me 29 years to find the word, and when I finally said it, they called the cops on me. I want to tell you everything. But first, like and subscribe, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because you are not going to believe how this ends. My name is Ruby. I am 29 years old, and I was raised to be invisible. Not the kind of invisible where people look through you, the kind where you learn to make yourself useful enough that they keep you around, even if they never actually see you. In my house, there was exactly one daughter who mattered, and it was not me. Her name was Vanessa. Vanessa was 2 years younger, 4 inches shorter, and took up approximately 11 times more oxygen in every room she entered. When Vanessa laughed, people turned around to find the source of the sound, like she was a bird species they'd never encountered before. When Vanessa cried, the world had to hold still until she was done. I was the furniture. That's not bitterness, that was my actual function. I was the sturdy oak table that held everything up. I was the good rug that absorbed the spills. I was the appliance nobody thought about until it broke. I figured out the rules young. I was 12. It was a Tuesday. I had walked home from school with a fever of 103.4. I know the exact number because I had taken my own temperature with the bathroom thermometer I had found and read myself because I was that kind of 12-year-old. My throat was raw. My backpack felt like it was filled with gravel. My mother was in the kitchen frosting a chocolate cake. Vanessa's favorite. Vanessa had scraped her knee in gym class. "Mom," I rasped. "I don't feel good." She didn't turn around. She was making a sugar flour. "Very important work." "Not now, Ruby. Vanessa is having a terrible day. Go lie down." I stood in the doorway for what felt like a long time. I wanted her to put her hand on my forehead. I wanted her to say, "Oh, sweetheart." I wanted her to call the school the next day and say my daughter is sick. She's staying home. Instead, I went to my room. I got my own water. I found the aspirin. I put myself to bed. The next morning, I made my own toast and went to school. When I came home with an A on my history project, my father nodded from behind his newspaper and said, "That's good, Ruby. We expect that from you." That single sentence was my entire childhood compressed into 17 words. We expect that from you. You are not allowed to struggle. You are not allowed to fail. You are not allowed to need things. You are capable, so you deserve nothing. I became the family fixer by default. When the washing machine flooded the laundry room at 16, I didn't call my parents. I turned off the water valve. I mopped the floor with every towel in the house. I found the manual in the junk drawer, opened the back panel, found the clogged hose, and fixed it myself. When they came home, I said, "The washer leaked." I fixed it. My father didn't look up from his mail. "Good job, Ruby." Then he turned to Vanessa. "How was dance, princess? Did you get the solo?" I stood in the hallway, hands smelling like dirty water and grease, watching them hug. I was 16. I was already learning that my usefulness was the price of admission to this family, not my personality, not my accomplishments, not my love, my usefulness. The awful truth is, I thought if I was perfect enough, useful enough, capable enough, they would eventually love me back the same way. I thought I could earn it. I thought it was a transaction I just hadn't completed yet. I was wrong. Being useful didn't make them love me more. It just made them use me more. I was 24 when the transaction became financial. It was a Sunday in October. I had just gotten a promotion. I was a project manager at a logistics firm. Good salary, good benefits, my first real taste of professional success. Ethan, my boyfriend, and I were sitting on the couch with a stack of brochures about Italy. We had been saving for the trip for 8 months. Florence, the Amalfi Coast, 2 weeks. My phone rang. My mother. She was crying so hard I couldn't understand her words for the first 30 seconds. My heart went to my throat. Someone died. A car accident. I drove over immediately. My parents were at the kitchen table, the same table where this whole story would eventually circle back and explode, surrounded by bank letters, red stamps, bold warnings, foreclosure notice, 90 days past due. My father looked pale and defeated. My mother was shredding a tissue. They explained it in circles. Bad investments, credit cards, a refinanced mortgage they'd stretched too far. They were 3 months behind. The bank wanted the house. They looked at me. They didn't ask. They just looked at me. Those eyes, the same eyes that looked past me for 24 years, were suddenly genuinely, completely, entirely focused on me. I heard myself say it before I'd even decided. I can help. My mother jumped up. She hugged me. Oh, Ruby, thank God. You're an angel. Just for a little while. Just until Dad's business picks up. Just for a little while turned into 60 months. The first transfer was $3,000 to stop the foreclosure. Then $2,000 every month after that. I set up the automatic transfer on the first of each month, and I watched it leave my account with the same quiet grief of someone watching a bird fly away. January 4th, $2,000. February 2nd, $2,000. March 3rd, $2,500. On and on. I told Ethan that night. He was quiet for a long time. As long as they appreciate it, Ruby. They didn't appreciate it. A month later, I went to visit them and found a brand new 65-inch flat-screen TV on the living room wall. My stomach turned. Mom, how did you afford this? I just paid your mortgage yesterday. She waved her hand. Put it on a store card. No interest for 6 months. Don't be such a sourpuss, Ruby. We need a little joy. I swallowed the anger. I made excuses for them. They were stressed. They were grieving their financial security. I told myself it wouldn't be forever. 2 years in, Vanessa graduated college. 6 years to get a 4-year degree because she needed to find herself. My parents threw a $4,000 backyard party, catered food, a DJ, an open bar. In the backyard I was paying for. Then they led her to the driveway. There was a brand new car with a bow on it. Vanessa screamed. She jumped up and down. Oh my God, you're the best parents in the world! Ethan was standing next to me, holding my hand. His grip was tight enough to hurt. When I graduated, I got a card with $50 inside. I had worked 2 jobs through college to pay my own tuition. I graduated with honors. My mother said, "We're so proud of you, Ruby. You're so capable. We know you'll do something sensible with that." $50. I stood in that driveway watching Vanessa honk the horn of her new car while my parents laughed and clapped, and I understood something for the first time. They didn't see me as a daughter. They saw me as a resource, and resources don't get gifts. They get allocated. I kept paying. I kept my mouth shut. Month 37, month 42, month 58. That money was a down payment on a house. It was a wedding. It was my retirement. It was Florence. It was gone. I found out about the wedding on a Thursday during a phone call I almost didn't answer. Vanessa was marrying a man named Mark. Nice enough guy. Not great with money, which made them a perfect match. My parents were throwing them a fairy tale wedding at the Meridian Country Club. Crystal centerpieces, live orchestra, thousands of white roses. We want to give her the wedding of her dreams, my mother told me. Mom, I said quietly, you still owe on the house. We have a plan, she said, breezy as a summer curtain. I assumed the plan was me. I was the maid of honor. I wore the pale yellow dress Vanessa picked, the shade that made me look like I had food poisoning. I held her bouquet. I fixed her train. I smiled for every photograph. I stood beside her at the altar and watched my father walk her down the aisle with tears in his eyes. He looked so proud. He had tears in his eyes. I had not once seen my father cry for me, not at my graduation, not when I told him about the promotion, not when I mentioned offhandedly that I'd had a health scare that turned out to be nothing. I had needed a biopsy. My mother had said, "I'm sure it's benign, honey. I can't come down. Vanessa is having a crisis with her hairstylist." But here he was, tears for Vanessa. I sat down next to Ethan at the reception. The champagne flowed. The speeches started. Then my father took the microphone. My mother stood beside him. She was holding a blue folder. The room went quiet in that particular way rooms do when something important is about to happen. "Mark, Vanessa," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. "We know how hard it is to start a life together in this economy. We want to give you a foundation." My mother stepped forward. She was radiant. "We didn't want to give you a toaster," she said into the microphone. A laugh moved through the crowd. "We wanted to give you a future." She held up the folder. "We're giving them our home." The room exploded. People stood. They cheered. Vanessa shrieked and buried herself in my father's chest. Mark covered his face with both hands. Someone at table 7 actually whooped. I did not move. "We're giving them our home." Our home. The home I had paid $2,000 a month for 60 months to keep. The home I had saved from foreclosure with my own savings account. The money for Florence. The money for a wedding of my own. The money for a life I had put on hold for 5 years. My mother caught my eye across the room. She gave me a little wave, a smile. "Isn't this wonderful?" She truly didn't understand what she had done. She wasn't just giving away a house. She was wrapping 5 years of my labor in a white bow and handing it to the golden child. And she thought it was generosity. She thought she was being a good mother. She was being a good mother, just not to me. Ethan leaned close. His jaw was tight. "Did you know about this?" "No," I said. My voice was dead and flat. "Ruby, I need air." I walked out of the ballroom, past the cheering tables, past the bar, out through the double doors into the parking lot. The music thumped against the walls behind me. I stood under the stars. I took out my phone. I opened my banking app. Scheduled transfer, $2,000, first of the month. I pressed cancel. Then I pressed delete. It was a small click. It sounded like a gunshot. I was done. I had 22 days of quiet before the text arrived. Family dinner at Vanessa's new house, Sunday at 6. Dad is making his famous roast. Don't be late. No acknowledgement of the wedding. No mention of the house. No thank you. No, is everything okay, Ruby? Just a dinner invitation delivered like a summons. Ethan drove. I couldn't trust my hands on the wheel. The house looked strange without my parents' car in the driveway. Vanessa's car was in the master spot now. My parents were parked on the street. There was something deeply clarifying about that detail. They had given away their own parking. My mother had already started rearranging the furniture. "Don't trip on the rug," she chirped as she ushered us in. "I'm just adjusting the feng shui." The energy flow in the living room was all wrong. She had pushed the heavy oak sofa, the one I had helped pay to reupholster, against the far wall. The coffee table was at a weird diagonal, and Vanessa was sitting on the floor flipping through a magazine, not helping. My father came out of the kitchen holding a glass of red wine. He looked like a man who no longer had a mortgage. We sat at the dining table, the same table where 5 years ago they had laid out the bank letters and looked at me with those desperate eyes. My mother served the roast. Vanessa got the best cut. Mark got the second best. My father, then Ethan. She put a small, dry, overcooked piece on my plate. We made small talk. The weather, the neighbors, Mark's new job. Then my father put down his fork. He and my mother exchanged the look. I knew that look. It was the look of a plan. "We have some news," he said. My stomach clenched. "Since we gave the house to Vanessa and Mark," my mother began, smiling a smile that had nothing behind it, "your father and I are officially homeless." She laughed like it was funny. "We can't stay here forever," she continued. "They're newlyweds. They need their privacy, so we've been thinking, are you renting an apartment?" Ethan asked carefully. He was already holding my hand under the table. My father shook his head. "We're not apartment people. You know that." My mother turned her gaze to me. "We've decided the best solution is to move into your vacation house." She said it like she was suggesting dessert. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. "Excuse me?" I said. "Your cabin at the lake," she repeated, slower, like I was being dim. "It's fully furnished. It has a garden. It's quiet. We can move in next weekend. You cover the mortgage and the taxes. It's your investment anyway. We'll handle the electric and water. Works out for everyone." "I already started packing the winter clothes," she added. She held out her hand across the table. "I'll need the alarm code and a new set of keys. I think I still have an old one, but I want a fresh set." Her palm was literally open. She was waiting for me to drop the keys into it, right there, over the roast beef. Something inside me went very, very still. I looked at the dry piece of meat on my plate. I looked at Vanessa scrolling her phone, completely uninterested. I looked at my mother's outstretched hand. 5 years, $124,500. I had done the math the night after the wedding. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and pulled up every transfer I had ever made to them. I printed the records. I put them in a black binder. I wrote "passed" on the spine in thick marker. The binder was the weight of a brick, $124,500, and now she wanted more. "No," I said. The words sat in the air between us like an object none of them knew how to pick up. My mother's smile faltered. "What did you say?" "No," I said again. My voice was steady. "You cannot move into my vacation house." My father laughed nervously. "Ruby, stop joking. We need somewhere to live." "I'm not joking." I looked at him directly. "You gave away your home. That was your choice. You did it to look generous in front of 300 people at a country club wedding. You didn't ask me if you could give away the house I spent 5 years paying for. You didn't consult me. You just did it. That was your right. But the consequences of your choices are yours. We did it for your sister," my mother snapped. "And what about me?" I asked. No yelling, no tears, just the question, sitting there. "I paid your mortgage for 60 months, I said. "That money was my life. It was vacations I didn't take. It was a wedding I didn't have. It was a savings account I drained. And you never once asked if it was hurting me. Not once in 5 years did you say, 'Ruby, are you okay? Is this too much?' You just expected the transfer on the first of the month and bought a flat-screen TV when the payment cleared. That is in the past," my father shouted. He slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. "Why are you always obsessed with money? It's ugly, Ruby. It's so ugly. I bring it up because you are asking for a free house," I said. Again. "We are your parents," my mother shrieked. The tears started. Her weapon, deployed on schedule. "Do you want us to sleep on the street? Is that what you want? After everything we've done for you? You have pensions," I said. "You can rent. You have options. You just don't want to spend your own money when you can spend mine." "Vanessa," my mother turned desperately. "Tell her she's being crazy." Vanessa looked up from her phone, annoyed. "Ruby, come on. You hardly use the place. Don't be a hoarder." I looked at my sister, the golden child, the one who had received a free house, a free car, a fairy tale wedding, and couldn't give up a piece of dry land for the parents who gave her everything. "If you're worried about them," I said to Vanessa, "why don't they stay here? You have 4 bedrooms. I paid for the roof." Vanessa recoiled. "No, we're newlyweds. We need our space, and I need mine." I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I stood tall. "The answer is no. Don't go to the lake house. Don't try to move in. You are not welcome there. If you walk out that door," my father said, standing, pointing, his face gone red, "you are turning your back on this family." "No, Dad," I said. "I'm turning my back on being used." I looked at Ethan. He was already on his feet. Napkin dropped on the table. "Excellent roast," he said dryly. "Shame about the company." We walked to the door. My mother screamed something from the dining room. I heard the words ungrateful and rot, and then the night air hit my face and I was outside. I sat in the passenger seat while Ethan drove because my hands were shaking too badly to manage the ignition. When we got on the highway, I cried. I cried for the 12-year-old who took her own temperature, for the teenager who fixed the washing machine and stood in the hallway smelling like dirty water, for the woman who transferred $2,000 on the first of every month for 60 months and never once got a thank you. By the time we reached our apartment, the crying was done. What replaced it was colder and calmer than anything I'd felt before. "They think I'll cave," I told Ethan as we walked into the kitchen. I didn't take off my coat. "They think I'll call tomorrow and apologize apologize and mail them the keys. Then we make sure they can't get in," he said. I sat at the kitchen table. I opened my laptop. First, I blocked their phone numbers. All three of them. Mom, Dad, Vanessa. The silence was instant. Second, I opened the smart home app for the lake house. I deleted every saved user code. I deleted the entry labeled Parents Emergency. I changed the master password. "They have a physical key," I said. "An old brass key. I gave it to them years ago." "We can't change the lock tonight," Ethan said, "but we can make entry impossible." I called the Lakeview County Sheriff's Department non-emergency line. I explained the situation calmly to the dispatcher. I was the owner of a property. I had a disgruntled family member with an old key, and I had reason to believe they might attempt unauthorized entry. I asked that they note it. I called Safeguard Home Security, my alarm company. I spoke to a supervisor named Carol Enright. I told her I needed an updated protocol on my account. If the front door sensor triggered without a valid keypad code, I wanted police dispatched immediately. No delay. "I'll put a priority flag on the account," Carol said. "You're the sole authorized user now?" "Yes," I said. "Just me." I hung up and opened my bank records. I searched, transfer to mom. The list populated. Page after page of entries going back 5 years. January 4th, $2,000. February 2nd, $2,000. December 14th, $3,500 for the roof repair they called an absolute emergency. July 9th, $2,000 so mom wouldn't cry about her garden dying. I printed every page. I 3-hole punched them. I put them in a black binder and organized them by year. Then I picked up a calculator. $124,500. I wrote "past" on the spine in thick black marker and put the binder on the shelf. The next morning, an email arrived from my father. Subject line, "Lake House Weekend. Ruby, stop being dramatic. We are packing the truck. We are going up to the lake house Saturday. We expect the alarm to be off. We are your parents, and we demand respect. We will discuss your attitude when we are settled." I read it twice. He truly didn't believe me. I forwarded it to the Lakeview County Sheriff's Department with a short note. "I am the property owner at this address. I have informed these individuals in writing that they are not welcome. If they arrive, they are trespassing." I hit send without my hand shaking. Saturday morning, I was at the grocery store squeezing avocados when my phone rang. Unknown number. 800 prefix. "Miss Miller, this is Carol Enright at Safeguard Home Security. We have a perimeter breach at your property on Lakeview Drive. The front door sensor has been triggered." I put the avocado down. "Was the alarm deactivated with a code?" "No, ma'am. The door was opened with a physical key. The system was not disarmed. The siren is currently sounding. My father had done it. He had driven 2 hours north, ignored my certified letter, and used that old brass key. Dispatch the police," I said. "Officers from Lakeview County have been notified. ETA approximately 15 minutes. I'm on my way." I left my cart in the aisle. I called Ethan from the parking lot. "They broke in," he said. "I'm coming." And that was the whole conversation. I don't remember much of the 2-hour drive. I remember my hands on the wheel, white at the knuckles. I remember the landscape going past the windows in a blur. I remember running through numbers in my head. $124,500, 60 months, 5 years. I turned onto the gravel road that leads to the cabin and saw the lights through the trees, blue strobes pulsing through the pines. 2 patrol cruisers in my driveway, their trunk open, suitcases on the grass, my mother's wine-red duffel bag with the broken zipper sitting on my lawn. They had brought everything. I parked behind the police cars and stepped out. Officer Dennis Pulaski, 11 years with the Lakeview County Sheriff's Department, was standing on the porch, arms crossed, while my mother screamed at him. His partner, Deputy Maria Santos, was standing near the SUV, notepad out, watching my father with the calm, professional patience of someone who has seen every version of this situation. "This is my daughter's house," my mother was yelling. "We are family. You cannot treat us like criminals." My father was sitting on the porch steps, head in his hands. He looked like the air had gone out of him. Officer Pulaski turned when he heard my car door. "Ma'am, stay back. I'm the owner," I said clearly. I held up my driver's license. "Ruby Miller, this is my property." His expression changed slightly. He walked toward me. "These individuals claim to be your parents and say they have permission to be here. They are my parents," I said. "They do not have permission. I sent written notice 3 weeks ago. I have a copy of the email I forwarded to your department." "Ruby," my mother ran down the porch steps. Her face went from furious to desperate in a single second. Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them we live here." She reached for me. I stepped back. I put my hands up. "Don't touch me." She froze. I turned back to Officer Pulaski. "They used an old emergency key I gave them years ago. The smart lock was updated. They were not given a new code. This was not authorized entry." "She's lying," my father said from the steps. He stood. He held up the brass key. "I have the key right here. I raised this girl. I paid for her." "Sir," Officer Pulaski said, "please put the key down. She is a child," my father snapped. She is the property owner," Pulaski said, and the patience in his voice had a new edge. "Sir, key down." The key landed on the porch railing with a small clink. Pulaski turned to me. "Miss Miller, because there's no sign of forced entry and these are family members, we'd typically classify this as a civil dispute. Since you're present and asserting trespass, we can remove them. Do you want to pursue criminal charges for breaking and entering?" The air went completely still. My mother looked at me. Her face had gone the color of old chalk. She knew what criminal charges meant. She understood finally that this was real. "Ruby," she whispered, "please." I looked at them. I looked at the suitcases on my lawn, the cooler they'd packed packed for moving day. The wine red duffel with the broken zipper. I thought about the binder. $120, $40, $500. I thought about the blue folder. We're giving them our home. I thought about the $50 graduation card. No, I said to Officer Pulaski. I don't want to press charges. My mother's breath went out of her in a sob. But I want them formally trespassed, I continued. I want a police report stating they are banned from this property. If they return, I want them arrested on site. Understood. He walked toward my parents. He took out his notepad. Folks, the owner has declined charges. You're lucky. However, you are being issued a criminal trespass warning. You need to collect your belongings and leave this property immediately. If you return, you will be placed under arrest. Do you understand? We have nowhere to go, my mother wailed. We rented a truck. We canceled our other options. We can't. That's not a police matter, ma'am, Officer Pulaski said. You have 10 minutes. I stood by my car with my arms crossed. I watched my father, who had always acted so large in every room, struggle to zip a suitcase on the grass. I watched my mother throw clothes into the trunk, crying. They kept looking at me. They were waiting for me to be Ruby again. The old Ruby. The one who would have already said, okay, just stay tonight. We'll figure it out in the morning. I didn't move. Ethan pulled up just as they were closing the trunk. He got out and stood beside me. Neither of us spoke. My father walked past us to the driver's side. He stopped. He looked me in the eyes. You are a cold, heartless girl, he said. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm the daughter you created, I said. You taught me that feelings don't matter and money does. You just didn't think the lesson would apply to yours. He flinched. Got in the car. Deputy Santos asked my mother to hand over the key before they left. My mother placed it on the porch railing. The gravel crunched under the SUV's tires. The police cruiser followed them to the road. When the taillights disappeared around the bend, the woods went quiet. I walked up the steps. I picked up the old brass key. I walked to the edge of the tree line. I threw it as hard as I could into the dark. It landed somewhere in the brush with a soft, final thud. I sold the lake house 3 weeks later. Not because they pressured me into it. They had no more power to pressure me. But because I drove up there the following weekend and sat on the porch and felt nothing but the echo of blue lights in the trees. Every pine was the shape of a police cruiser. Every creak of the floorboards was my mother's voice. They had taken even that from me. I called a real estate agent named Patricia Howe, 17 years in lakefront property, on a Tuesday afternoon. I want to list the cabin on Lakeview Drive, I said. It's a strong market right now, she said. Are you certain? Beautiful property. I'm certain. I want a clean slate. We listed it Thursday because I had renovated it myself, stripped the floors until my hands bled, chose every curtain, every mug in the cabinet. It sold in 4 days for $80,000 more than I had paid. When the closing documents were signed and the wire hit my account, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. My old instinct whispered to me, you should give some of this to them. They're struggling in that apartment. It would be the kind thing. I recognized that voice. It was the 12-year-old who made her own toast. The girl who thought love was a transaction she just hadn't completed the payments on yet. I opened a new savings account. I named it Ruby's Freedom Fund. I didn't tell my parents I sold the house. They found out eventually. My father sent an email. He had moved to email since I blocked his texts. Subject, completely unacceptable. We heard you sold the cabin. You profited enormously. Your mother is ill with stress. If you have any decency left, you will share that money with the family. We are struggling because of you. I read it once. I dragged it to the trash. I emptied the trash. Then I booked 2 business class tickets to Florence, Italy. I woke up before the alarm in a rented apartment in the old Charno neighborhood. Wooden beams on the ceiling, shutters closed, thin gold light coming through the cracks. I lay there and listened. My brain reached for its old morning ritual. Did I pay their electric bill? Did Dad mention something about a water leak? Is Vanessa angry with me? There was nothing, just silence. I got up. I made coffee in the small kitchen. I carried the mug to the window and pushed open the shutters. Florence. Rooftops of red clay in every direction. The dome of the cathedral rising against a sky going pink and orange with the dawn. The smell of roasting coffee and the river. I breathed in, all the way down, for the first time I could remember. No tightness in my chest. No invisible hand squeezing. Ethan appeared in the doorway, hair wrecked from sleep, squinting. You're up early. I'm watching the sunrise. He came and wrapped his arms around me from behind, rested his chin on my head. Are you thinking about home? He asked softly. No, I said, and I realized it was true. I'm not thinking about home, because this, right here with you, inside my own skin, this is home. He kissed the top of my head. Good, because I want to see the David statue and eat pizza until I physically can't. I laughed, a real one, from the stomach. We walked out into the streets of Florence. The air was cool and clean. Shopkeepers were sweeping sidewalks. The smell of fresh bread from the bakeries. We moved through it hand in hand, and I let myself think about my parents one final time, not with guilt, but with the clear-eyed distance of someone who has finally left a burning building and can see the smoke from a safe distance. They were in an apartment on the south side of town, I'd been told. Thin walls, beige carpet, a dripping faucet in the bathroom. My mother had called from a payphone once. I answered thinking it was a client. She told me it was awful. She begged me for help with a deposit, or maybe just the lake house for the winter. She promised they wouldn't bother me. I had listened, and then I had said, I won't help you, Mom. You gave away your biggest asset to give Vanessa a start. Now ask Vanessa for help. Vanessa doesn't have money, she'd said. She's just starting out. So am I'd said. But I spent my start supporting you. I'm done. Goodbye. I had hung up. I'd waited for the guilt. It didn't come. We turned a corner in Florence into a narrow street, and Ethan stopped, pointing at a bakery window. That. I want that. He was pointing at a tray of cornetti, the Italian cousin of the croissant, flaky and golden and dusted with powdered sugar. I looked at them, at him, at the narrow cobblestone street curving away ahead of us into the light. Yes, I said. Let's get that. We went in. We ordered. We stood at the counter eating pastry with our hands like children, and when I licked the powdered sugar off my thumb, I laughed again because of how simple it was, how clean, how entirely mine. My name is Ruby. I am 29 years old. For 5 years, I paid to keep a house standing that was never mine. Then I said no, once clearly, without apology. Mom laughed. You're not part of this family. I raised my glass. Perfect. Then don't ask for money. The room went dead silent. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not the kind that escapes when something catches you off guard. A real one, loose and warm, like she'd just heard a joke she'd been waiting on. The Chardonnay was already halfway down the table, and she looked at the room the way people do when they want witnesses. Oh, sweetheart, Denise said, her hand resting flat on the tablecloth. You're not part of this family. 20 people. 20 people at my father's 65th birthday dinner, and not one of them made a sound. I watched the smile stay on her face for a full 3 seconds after the words left her mouth. She was proud of it. That's what I keep coming back to, even now. She held it like it was a gift she'd finally gotten to give. I lifted my glass. Perfect, I said. Then don't ask for money. Let me back up, because that moment doesn't make sense without the 19 months that came before it. My name is Emma Reyes. I'm 31 years old. I'm a financial analyst for a logistics company based out of Indianapolis, and I've been calculating other people's risks for a living since I was 26. I'm good at it. The irony of being so methodical with other people's money while quietly bleeding out through my own bank account is not lost on me. It's actually the thing I think about most when I try to understand how it all happened. My father, David Reyes, married Denise when I was 11. My mother and he had divorced 2 years before that. Nothing dramatic, just two people who had gradually become roommates and then, eventually, strangers. Dad got remarried fast. Denise was pretty and certain, and she had a son from her first marriage named Tyler, who was 9, and I remember thinking at the time that this was fine, that I could be part of 2 families, that the math could work out. It didn't, really, but I spent about 20 years pretending it did. Denise was never cruel to me in the obvious ways. She didn't forget my birthday or refuse to set a place for me at the table. She was civil, consistent, and just warm enough that I could never point to anything specific and say this. Right here, this is the thing. What she did instead was subtler. She created a system of distinction. Tyler's accomplishments got framed. My accomplishments got mentioned. Tyler's problems were family emergencies. My problems were personal inconveniences. Tyler was her son. I was David's daughter from his first marriage, which is how she introduced me to people for the first 20 years of her relationship with my father, until I quietly asked her to stop and she acted like I'd overreacted. Dad saw some of it. I think he saw more than he admitted, but Denise was his second chance, and Tyler was the son he'd always wanted. And my father is not a bad man. He's just a man who wanted peace badly enough to buy it in small compromises, over and over again, until the price had gotten very high and he'd forgotten what he'd started with. I moved to Indianapolis when I was 23. I visited on holidays. I called my dad every Sunday. I told myself this was fine. Then, in March of the year before the dinner, Denise texted me, Emma, your dad's rehab bills from the bypass surgery are behind. We don't want to worry him. Could you help us out this month? Just until we get sorted. She said, just until we get sorted. 11 more times over the next 19 months. I want to be honest about why I said yes the first time, because it matters for everything that came after. I said yes because my dad had a bypass surgery, and I was scared, and I loved him, and I had the money, and she told me not to tell him because his pride was fragile, and I believed her. That's all. There was no complicated calculation. I was a daughter who was scared for her father, and a woman who had been trying to earn a seat at a table her whole life, and Denise had finally given me something I could do that looked like family. So I set up the transfers, $3,000 most months, to Denise's personal account, because she said it was easier, because she said Dad's name on the bank statement might alert him. A few months it was $4,500. Once it was $6,000, when Tyler's custom truck shop hit what she called a rough patch. I told myself that was a one-time thing. I told myself that every time it was more than $3,000. I told myself a lot of things. Dad's 65th birthday dinner was held at the house in Carmel, a 4-bedroom colonial with a deck overlooking a nothing special backyard that had always seemed slightly too big for what it was. Denise had done the whole thing right. Tablecloths, real candles, roast chicken with thyme and lemon that filled the kitchen when I came through the door, 20 relatives arranged around a table that had been extended with a folding section covered in a matching cloth. Dad looked good. He'd put on a little weight since the surgery, the healthy kind, and he laughed easily and refilled people's water glasses himself because he was the kind of man who could never quite let the hosting go. I'd driven down that afternoon from Indianapolis, 2 hours on I-65 with the windows cracked, and a podcast about tax shelters I wasn't really listening to. I hugged him for a long time in the driveway, the way I always always did, my face against his shoulder, measuring how much of him was still there. He felt solid. I told him 65 looked good on him and he told me I was biased, and I said obviously. Dinner was fine. It was fine for a long time. Tyler announced his engagement around dessert. He stood up with his wine glass and said he and Rachel had been talking, and they'd decided on September, and everyone applauded, and Rachel turned the most genuine shade of pink I'd ever seen on an adult woman, and I applauded too, because I actually liked Rachel. She was steady and literal, and she'd been good for Tyler in the way that practical people can sometimes be good for charming ones. I was happy for them. I was. Then Denise reached beside her chair. She produced a blue folder, thick, already tabbed, like she'd had it prepared. She waited for the applause to settle, and then she stood up too, because Denise has always understood that two people standing in the same room is still a competition, and she smiled at the table and said she and David had something to announce as well. They were transferring the lake cabin to Tyler before the wedding, as a wedding gift, so the property would stay with the next generation. I put my fork down. More applause. My Aunt Karen, who lives in Zionsville and means well but reads rooms poorly, said it was the most romantic thing she'd ever heard. Dad was smiling in that particular way he had when he was pleased, but slightly overwhelmed. Eyebrows up, a little breath through his nose. He hadn't looked at me yet. I was doing the math. I have a problem where I'm always doing the math. The cabin had a line of credit against it. I didn't know the exact figure yet, but I knew because Denise had told me 7 months earlier that they'd borrowed a little against the cabin to cover Tyler's payroll shortfall when his shop had a bad quarter. The house mortgage was behind. I knew because Denise had texted me 3 weeks prior asking me to cover this month's payment because the bank account was unusually tight. Dad's rehab bills had just been cleared. I knew because I had cleared them, personally, 4 months ago. And now she was announcing a gift of real property. "Are you really giving Tyler the cabin?" I said, "when the mortgage on this house is still behind and Dad's rehab bills from last year haven't been paid?" It wasn't loud. I wasn't performing for the table. I was talking to Denise and Denise alone because she had a blue folder full of paperwork, and I had 19 months of bank statements in my phone, and I needed to understand if she actually believed the math worked or if she just assumed I would keep making it work. Rachel's smile went first. Tyler's eye roll came next, that slow, theatrical one he'd been doing since he was 12. Denise folded her napkin with the deliberate care of someone deciding which version of themselves to deploy. "That isn't your concern," she said. "It becomes my concern every time you text me asking for help." Tyler leaned back in his chair, easy, comfortable. "Come on, Emma. The cabin is family property. Then use family money." She laughed, and she said it, and I raised my glass. Dad looked at me, then at Denise, then back at me. His eyebrows had changed shape. "What money?" he said. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady. I've thought about this a lot, how my hands were completely steady when they probably should have been shaking. I opened my banking app. I navigated to the transfers tab. I turned the screen toward the center of the table, not dramatically, not pointed at anyone, just turned it so it was visible. "The money I've been sending to Denise every month," I said. "For this house, for your medication, for Tyler's problems, 19 months, all of it stops tonight." The color that left Denise's face was extraordinary. It didn't happen all at once. It went in stages, like someone slowly turning down a dimmer switch, and I watched her make 3 separate decisions in about 4 seconds about which direction to go. Indignation, confusion, or the truth. She chose indignation, which is what I would have predicted if you'd asked me 6 months earlier. But the delay was new. The delay told me something. Dad was still looking at her. He didn't say anything for a long time. Long enough that my Aunt Karen made a small sound and picked up her wine glass, and the cousin next to her, Brandon, very quietly pushed back from the table like he was considering whether to leave the room. No one actually left. People almost never do, when the thing they've been pretending isn't happening finally surfaces. Dad looked at Denise and said, very quietly, "Her name is on your account?" Denise said nothing. "Tell me her name is not on your account." Still nothing. I wasn't looking at him when I said it. I was looking at the centerpiece. White candles, dried eucalyptus, a small framed photo of Dad at maybe 45, grinning in front of the cabin. "She has a separate account," I said. "I sent it there, so it wouldn't show up in the joint statements." He didn't raise his voice. He never raises his voice. That's one of the things about my father that I've always simultaneously loved and found infuriating. The quiet is harder to read than anger. You never know if it means he's accepted something, or if it means he's still processing, or if it means he's become briefly unreachable behind some wall that exists in him that I've never had a map to. He excused himself from the table. He went upstairs and he did not come back down for dinner, and the 20 relatives slowly ate their dessert in near silence around a table that felt like the aftermath of something, and Denise sat perfectly straight in her chair with her hands in her lap and her expression arranged into something that wanted to look like calm dignity and mostly just looked like a calculation. I drove home to Indianapolis that night. I did not speak to Denise again before I left. Dad showed up at my condo the next morning with 2 coffees from Kroger in a cardboard carrier and 10 years he hadn't had on his face the night before. "I need the truth," he said before I'd fully opened the door. I let him in. He sat on my couch without taking his coat off. I opened my laptop on the coffee table and turned it toward him. 19 bank transfers, dates in the left column, amounts in the middle, recipient in the right. Denise M. Reyes, personal account, January, February, March. He scrolled slowly. His jaw tightened about 4 entries in and stayed tight for the rest of it. "She told me the mortgage money was from her mother's estate," he said. "Her mother's estate estate ran out 2 years ago. I sat across from him. The rest came from me, and most of what I was sending, it wasn't going to the mortgage. Tyler. He looked at the screen for another long moment. Then he closed the laptop carefully, the way you close something when you're not sure what to do with your hands. By noon, we were sitting across from a loan officer named Patricia Whitmore at his bank branch on Keystone Avenue. Patricia had 17 years in consumer lending. Her nameplate said so, and she was kind in the particular way that people are kind when the news they're delivering is very bad. She walked us through the statements Dad had pulled from Denise's desk drawer that morning. Not the joint account, the other one. The house was not slightly behind on its mortgage. The house was 92 days from entering foreclosure review. The line of credit against the cabin had been drawn down by $38,000. Tyler's custom truck shop, the Rough Patch, had failed 11 months prior, not in the recent quarter, and it had failed owing unpaid payroll taxes to the state of Indiana, outstanding vendor invoices totaling nearly $19,000, and 3 separate cash advances on business credit cards that Tyler had opened using the cabin address as collateral. Patricia Whitmore had a particular expression she kept making while she talked, a controlled sympathy that I recognized as the professional version of "this is worse than you think." I watched Dad clock it too. He's not a man who misses much in the end. He just sometimes chooses to. On the drive back, he gripped the steering wheel with both hands and stared straight ahead. "I knew she favored Tyler," he said. "I told myself that was normal. Parents have favorites, that's not. I never imagined she would take from you and hide it from me." "You never asked," I said. I wished immediately that I hadn't. Not because it wasn't true, because the truth in that moment was just additional weight for a man who was already struggling to stand up straight. But he nodded, slowly. "No," he said, "I didn't." Denise called me 11 times between 2 in the afternoon and 7:30 in the evening. Tyler called 4 times. I let them all go. Rachel sent one text at 6:15. "Please tell me this is a misunderstanding. I'm asking because I need to know what Tyler knew." I read it twice and didn't answer, because I didn't know yet what Tyler knew, and I didn't think it was my job to help Rachel figure out if her fiancé had been lying to her. She showed up at my door at 7:30. Denise, hair perfect, lipstick flawless, in the kind of deliberately put together presentation that tells you someone spent an hour preparing to look effortless. She radiated anger the way a structure fire radiates heat. You feel it before you're close enough to see the source. "You embarrassed me," she said. "In my own home. You stole from me and yours," I said. Her smile tightened. "Don't be dramatic. Families help each other." I leaned against my doorframe. "Families don't tell one daughter she isn't part of the family after taking her money for a year and a half." She dropped the performance. I'd only seen Denise drop the performance twice before in my entire life. Once at a hospital when my father's surgery ran 6 hours over schedule, and once when Tyler called her from county lockup at 2 a.m. when he was 24. Those times, what appeared underneath the performance was fear. What appeared underneath it now was something colder. "You've always been difficult," she said. "Tyler needed help. You have a career, a condo, a retirement account. What exactly were you being deprived of?" I stared at her. That sentence, more than anything at the dinner table, more than the laugh, more than "you're not part of this family." That sentence is the one I came back to for months after, trying to decide what it meant about the last 20 years, because it told me that what had been happening was not a secret she'd kept out of shame, or out of temporary desperation, or out of some complicated love for her son that had temporarily overridden her better judgment. It told me she had built a logical framework. Tyler needed. I had. Therefore, my resources belonged to Tyler. I wasn't being stolen from. I was being allocated. I was still standing there deciding what to say when I heard the door downstairs open and footsteps on the stairs, and my father appeared in the stairwell with his coat still on, like he'd come straight from the car. He'd heard enough from the hallway. He stepped between us, physically, in the narrow space of my doorway, and he looked at Denise for a moment without speaking. Then he asked one question. "Were you ever going to tell me the house was close to foreclosure?" She looked at him. She chose indignation over truth. "If Emma had any loyalty," she said, "we wouldn't be having this conversation." My father reached up, slowly, and removed his wedding ring. He did it quietly enough that Denise didn't notice until he set it on my entry table beside my keys. "Then let's have the right conversation," he said. "You and Tyler will come to my attorney's office tomorrow morning. Bring every statement, every loan document, every tax notice, every piece of paper related to the cabin, the house, and Tyler's business. If one page is missing, I file for legal separation and forensic accounting by noon." For the first time in my life, Denise looked genuinely afraid of my father. For the first time in my life, watching it didn't make me sad. The attorney was a man named Gerald Hatch, who had been handling my father's estate planning for 11 years, and who wore the same color of suit in every shade of gray, and who had the particular patience of someone who had spent a career watching families surprise themselves. His office smelled like lemon polish, old carpet, and expensive consequences. Dad sat at the head of the conference table. I sat to his left. Denise and Tyler sat across from us, both holding folders, both performing a flavor of outrage that was visibly struggling to hold shape as the documents accumulated on the table. Rachel came too, even though no one had explicitly invited her. By the time Gerald Hatch began going through the papers, I understood why she'd come. She needed to see it for herself. The numbers were brutal in the way that numbers are when they've been carefully arranged to look like something else for a very long time. Tyler's shop had failed nearly a year earlier than Denise had let on. He had hidden the payroll tax delinquency notices, addressed to the cabin, redirected through a P.O. box, for 8 months. He had bounced checks checks to 2 suppliers, and then opened credit accounts with 3 others using the cabin as an address of record. Denise had drained her personal savings trying to cover him, then moved to using my transfers when her savings ran out, then began skipping the house mortgage payments to float the rest, operating on the theory that she could fix everything once Tyler stabilized. Tyler had not stabilized. The detail that ended the marriage was smaller. Gerald Hatch found, in the folder Tyler had brought, a refinancing application, unsigned, undated, drafted by a loan officer at a different bank than their primary institution. My name was listed as a proposed co-borrower. Denise acknowledged, when pressed, that she had planned to approach me about co-signing a refinance on the house after the engagement settled down. My father looked at her for a long time. "You used my daughter as an emergency fund," he said, "and you plan to use her credit next." Denise lifted her chin. "I protected my son." "No," Dad said. "You sacrificed one child for another." Gerald Hatch was very quiet. He had a yellow legal pad on the table in front of him, and he wrote something on it and turned it face down. Tyler, for his part, said almost nothing during the meeting. He sat with his hands folded on the table, and he didn't look at me. At the end, when Gerald Hatch began outlining the formal options, Tyler looked at Rachel, and Rachel looked back at him, and whatever she read in his face determined something, because she closed her own folder and set it neatly in front of her and did not open it again. Things moved quickly after that, in the way that things move quickly once a structure that has been maintained by collective agreement and selective blindness is allowed to simply be what it actually is. Dad filed for legal separation within the month. He and Gerald Hatch and Patricia Whitmore from the bank worked through a debt recovery plan that required selling the cabin quickly, below market, but enough to eliminate the line of credit and stop the foreclosure clock with 6 weeks to spare. The house was refinanced under a payment structure Dad could sustain alone. The joint accounts were separated and audited. My transfers, all 19 months of them, were formally documented as unsecured personal loans, Gerald Hatch's suggestion, which gave Dad a legal mechanism to pursue recovery from Denise's share of the marital assets. I told him he didn't have to do that. He said he understood that, and he was doing it anyway. Tyler filed for personal bankruptcy in November. Rachel had returned the engagement ring sometime in October. She didn't announce it. She just stopped being present in the way that people quietly remove themselves when they've seen enough. I have genuine respect for how she handled it. She came to understand what she needed to understand, and then she acted on it without drama, and I think that takes more strength than people give it credit for. Denise rented an apartment in Fishers, 20 minutes north of the house. She told people I had torn the family apart. Some of the 20 relatives from the birthday dinner believed her at first, or at least maintained a position of uncertain sympathy that felt, from the outside, like belief. My Aunt Karen called me in December and spoke for 45 minutes about how families need to find grace and forgiveness for one another, and I listened and said I appreciated her calling and did not explain that grace is not the same as access. Then the paperwork started circulating. Gerald Hatch was thorough. The legal separation documents were a matter of record. The refinancing paperwork was a matter of record. Tyler's bankruptcy filing was a matter of record. Numbers with signatures have a particular way of traveling in family networks. Slowly at first, then all at once. My Aunt Karen did not call again. Dad lived in my guest room for 3 months that summer while the house was listed and sold. We were awkward at first, in the way that 2 people are awkward when they have spent years communicating through a third person's translation, and now the translator is gone, and they're standing there with the original language and uncertain fluency. We made coffee in the morning in near silence. We watched the news. He read the paper physically, which I found endearing in a way I was not brave enough to say out loud. One evening, late July, he was drying dishes while I washed, and he said, without looking up from the dish, "I should have seen more." "Yes," I said. I let it sit. Then I added, because the truth no longer needed to cut the way it once had, "But you see it now." He nodded. He set the dish in the cabinet. That was enough. A year later, Dad bought a small ranch house in a quiet part of Fishers. 1 story, no stairs, a backyard with a garden he started, badly, and then improved steadily through the fall. No lake view, no space organized around anyone else's idea of what a family should look like from the outside. It is a house scaled to his actual life, which I think is one of the most underrated forms of courage, the willingness to stop maintaining the architecture of what things were supposed to be. Tyler works inventory management at an auto parts warehouse on the east side of Indianapolis. We speak on birthdays and Christmas. He sounds smaller on the phone than he used to. Accountable people often do. The performance takes up space, and once it's gone, the voice finds its actual register. I don't mean this unkindly. I think the smaller version is closer to who he actually is. Denise and I have not repaired anything. I no longer pretend that we will. There is a version of this story where that's the saddest part, the unresolved relationship with the woman who was technically my stepmother for 20 years. But I've stopped believing that resolution is the only dignified ending. Some things don't resolve, they clarify. What became clear to me, not at the dinner, not in the attorney's office, but slowly, over the months that followed, in the ordinary hours of a life I was quietly reassembling, is that the money was never really the point. The money was the mechanism. What Denise actually took from me for 20 years was the simple certainty that my place at the table was real, that I was a daughter and not a resource, that being useful was not the condition of being loved. I had paid that price in $3,000 installments, and I had called it family because I wanted it to be family, and wanting something hard enough can make you very skilled failed at not looking directly at what you have instead. I'm not angry anymore. Or I'm angry differently. The kind of anger that has settled into something with weight and shape and uses, rather than just heat. I use it to be better at my job. I use it to be better at knowing when something is a relationship and when it's an arrangement. I use it to be braver in small specific ways than I used to be. The last thing I said to Denise at my doorway before Dad stepped between us was this: the next time you want to call someone family, try protecting their dignity first. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Some truths don't require a response. They just require the right person finally to say them out loud.